All right. Today's guest is Louis Grenier, the host of the No Bullshit Marketing podcast, Everyone Hates Marketers, and the creator of the Stand the Fuck Out course, teaching people the art of radical differentiation. He is raw, he's direct, he is French, and he's a man who truly cares about people. Bonjour, bonjour, Louis. Welcome to the show.
Bonjour. I'm raw. What does that mean?
Well, I guess you say it as you mean it. You don't sugarcoat it.
Nice.
Do you self-identify?
I do self-identify as a raw man. That's my first, the way I describe myself to others. Yes.
Awesome, good. Um, but let's start at a bit of a different part of your life than you're in now. We go back, I think it was about 6 years ago when you owned a marketing agency, just as I do now. And I'm looking at a picture in front of me here where you wear a three-piece suit. And in an email that you sent out once, you had a caption under the picture that said something like this. This is someone who acted the way he thought he was supposed to act because every other consultant he knew was doing it this way. This is someone who felt miserable inside because he wasn't being himself. He was ignoring his gut in favor of blending in. And then you also wrote, and I quote again, I like to look at it sometimes to remind myself how far I've come and to realize how happy I am today because I get to be who I am 100% of the time. Standing the fuck out starts from within. So what that tells me when I read that the first time and it kind of stuck with me, that's also why I would like to lead with this. So you might not always have been radically standing out, and you might have been one of those marketer everyone hates. How did you make the transformation from a guy who wants to blend in into the guy today known for radical differentiation? And what lessons have you learned along the way?
Yeah, I guess that's a nice place to start. I mean, the first thing I would say, the first caveat is that I'm a white dude. I'm straight and married, like to my wife for like a long time now. I've been brought up in a kind of a middle class background, and what I mean is that I've been extremely lucky to be born where I was born in the right context and whatever. I've never been kind of prosecuted for my beliefs or my sexual orientation or the color of my skin. And that put me at an advantage, unfortunately, in today's world. And so when I talk about not being myself, I also want to make sure that people understand that there are problems that are much bigger than that. And I know that people suffering from, their identity and all of that, that go way beyond the problem of me not feeling like I was doing exactly the job I could be doing as a marketer. So with that caveat, I mean, it always comes from a place of fear, meaning I was afraid of not making enough money. I had done a good job at a marketing startup before, and I wanted to do stuff on my own, and I was worried about making money, and I wanted to get money. My wife, girlfriend at the time, was kind of putting me under pressure to get a salary because I didn't want to be like just sitting on my ass all day. And so the normal reaction then when you're afraid is to look at the average, look at what others are doing, and just follow the herd. If everyone else is doing it this way, then let's do it this way, right? That's the safest option. So I didn't necessarily have a lot of like business acumen and marketing acumen. And so the normal thing for me was to look up to what I saw in conferences and events and looking at people in suits and talking with big words and and thinking this is how I need to be. So I went to River Island, which is a shop, like a brand that sell like nice clothes for like men and women. And I bought this three-piece suit for like 250 euros, something like that. And then I booked a photographer for like 300 euros. And we went to this place where most startup founders go to in Dublin. which is like on the Keys, and it's a nice area, and everyone does it. Everyone does it, like with the when they raise funding and they share their logo
Uh-huh.
on the thing. That's where they do it. So that was my idea. So I really went, instead of going to the edge of the map, I went to the very center where everyone congregates, and surely it didn't work out for me, right? I mean, that was kind of the thing. I was working so hard to be someone I wasn't, in terms of talking with big words and offering service that were not exactly what was in line with me. And it took me a long time to kind of process all of this. So you ask about how the transformation happened from that to now. And it wasn't like just a one shot event. It took me so long to kind of reconciliate who I am as a person, connecting the dots between my childhood, where I always been kind of an intellectual terrorist, as one of my teacher in high school called me, where I was always trying to find the holes in people's thinking and trying to find ways to stand out from my friends by doing this, to knowing that whatever campaigns I was doing at my work, and whatever projects I was doing at my work, the ones that energized me the most were the ones that were kind of edgy, that were taking a massive
Mm.
risk, um, or the client work that I used to do and all of that. And it took me so long to just like wrap my head around, this is my thing. Like, so it's not a one-shot event. It took a lot of courage at the start, like launching a podcast called Everyone Hates Marketers. It wasn't that easy. I had butterfly in my stomach. I was afraid. Launching that business almost a year ago, out of the podcast, was also very scary. I remember thinking about, is radical differentiation really the thing you need to double down on? Why not just becoming a marketing consultant now, and you can offer a different side of service? Because at the end of the day, you're quite known now for your podcast, and you could potentially make a living out of it. So it never ends, those thoughts. It's like an
Mm-hmm.
endless battle. It's an endless game of chess between yourself and yourself. It's like this endless challenging your own mindset and fighting those urges that your brain sends you, because what it wants to do is for you to survive. And it just, for you to survive, you follow the herd. That's what you've been brought up to. Like, that's how humans have been evolved to this point. But in today's age, where there's nothing to fear but potentially not making enough money at the end of the month, the way to stand out and actually to survive is to stick out, to go to the edge of the map, and fear to be seen as average.
Mm-hmm. And there's some kind of tension going on, right, between your nature, which is inherently unique, and you're inherently different, and at the same time, we feel the pressure to fit in. And I I like this kind of map analogy as well. But would you say that we necessarily need to start in the center? Like, most people start in the center of the map and kind of make their way out. Like how you started with the three-piece suit, is that kind of a necessary thing to go through in order to find your own voice
I think
as a
so.
company or as a person?
I think so, man. I think so, because to stand out, you must understand what is the norm. And if you haven't worked in a field for that long, you don't really understand the ins and outs of the norm, and you might make mistake this way. So absolutely. And I think it connects to a question that people ask a lot, which is, how do I find my voice? How do I say something that no one else said before? And the way to do it is to start saying stuff right now and see what sticks, and doubling down on what works and stopping what doesn't. But you'll never find it inside your brain working on it for 6 months without talking about it to anyone. That's kind of the answer. And I think that connects to your question. You must start doing something, even if it's not crazy different, until
Yeah.
you have enough insights about yourself, about your customer, about the market, about the competitors, to actually take a gamble, and go for it.
It's interesting. It just reminds me of something another entrepreneur said to me once, that his painting teacher said to him that you need to basically copy people in the beginning of your career, and then the voice that kind of comes up that is against what you're kind of copying is your own voice, and that's kind of how you can separate the two. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's how you can learn copywriting as well. I mean, one of the advice is to just literally copy uh, other people's work, not publishing it for your own, but just copy it, rewriting it, rewriting it, because you need to use a template. And the concept of radical differentiation and standing out from the crowd is not taking every single element of the product or the journey or whatever and make it different. It's about one thing that you can make different, and the rest must remain the same.
Right.
If you go too far out, people won't know which box to put you into. We can talk about the bullshit of category creation, and I know you had a
We
guest
will.
recently.
Yeah.
I know you had a guest recently talking about that. We can talk about the fact that it's not about um, going to the edge of the map every direction and trying to invent something that people won't understand. It's about leaning on something that already exists but playing with it.
And I mean, I think especially for what you're doing, like you're basically meta talking about differentiation. Um, and it takes a lot of courage and guts to kind of call out the bullshit of other people or other companies or kind of the market of itself, because it puts yourself on the line as well. Like, how do you? So when I look at you, it's kind of the purest form, I guess, of no bullshit in our form, because you kind of have to. But so how? What I want to ask is like, how do you define for yourself no bullshit and no fluff when it comes to marketing, and yeah, how do you decide it in your own practice?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's, again, I think it comes back from, it's intuitive. Like there's a massive difference between
Mm.
rational and irrational stuff. Like your rational part of the brain using logic versus the irrational things that you notice that are around, like something that is too spicy, too stupid, too smart, to whatever. That makes no sense at all if you ask a committee in a boardroom whether they would approve this campaign. For example, comparethemarket.com that does a compare the meerkat with the Russian accent, and the entire campaign is around meerkats. Makes no fucking sense. And so
Mhm.
it's like, sometimes it's about intuition, and I think I have a lot of that from my like childhood and teenagehood, and the experience in my work and stuff like that. And it's kind of difficult to kind of unbundle it. But to try to give you an answer to this, it's really about, am I able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I'm actually serving my people, I'm actually helping them. And I know for a fact that based on the clutter and the bullshit that is around, and the fact that it's so difficult to make a living nowadays with launching a business, it's my mission to try to help them as much as I can. And so I'm calling stuff out because I know for a fact it's bullshit for most people. Um, and the last thing I would say on that is, the people I serve are not marketers in big brands. The people I serve are people like you. So solopreneurs, consultants, agency owners, creators, startup founders, people who want to make a dent and challenge the bigger brands. And everything we're going to say moving forward is for them. If you're in a big company that is already established,
Mm.
this advice won't work as much anymore, because you need other stuff to actually make it work. Um, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean we talked about this a little bit before, because so by by nature, I think every human or every company is inherently unique and different. Um, in your estimation, like what makes it so hard to articulate our uniqueness, or I guess like what fears hold us back?
What people struggle with is that they take a bland average product that looks like everyone else, and they ask themselves, how do you make that stand out when I try to serve everyone? And inherently it's impossible. Like, you cannot take an average product that is designed for everyone and make it different. It's just, that's the wrong question to ask yourself. The question is, what group of people can I obsess over, who has a very strong pain in specific area, who's a bit quirky, who have like some stuff that make put them in common, not necessarily an industry they work for, but could be anything. And how can I serve them in the best way possible, with a product and experience that is best suited for them? And once you have this kind of intersection, then you can achieve uniqueness. But That's why I was saying a few seconds ago that this advice doesn't work for bigger brands, because bigger brands are by definition products for everyone. And what they need is reach. They need distinctiveness. They just need to be seen when they're compared in the supermarket. But at the end of the day, differentiation doesn't matter that much for them anymore until they start to struggle and stagnate, and they need to reinvent themselves with a new product, and the cycle starts all over again. So if you were asking me, for example, how do you make Tesco differentiate if they struggle at the minute, I would say you can't. It's too late. They are way too mature. What they need is to gain market share of voice, excess share of voice, all of those kind of stuff. But if you ask me, I'm a small supermarket, we sell organic food, and we're based in London, how do I compete against Tesco? Now we can talk.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so you mentioned you mostly serve like creators or entrepreneurs, and agency owners and so forth. You have been at, like, I would say, a fairly, not really established, but like pretty established startup with Hotjar, I would say, at the time. I don't know how old they were at the time. So you kind of come in as a marketer with a product that is already there, and then you're trying to kind of carve out that niche. There is existing customers. So how did you do that at the time, or how do you think about radical differentiation in that kind of setting, when you maybe don't have all the agency yourself to carve out a completely new market, or change the product inherently?
So when you're given a product that already exists in a startup and trying to differentiate, yeah, I think it's about looking at it from the lens of the market, not the product. Something that happens a lot is you look at your product and then you ask, how do I find the right customers for it? I think it's, again, the wrong question and the wrong logic to use. It's really about looking back at, okay, who's the market that we're serving, that we've obsessed over, and is the product that we have fitting for that? I really believe as marketers, we've lost our seat at the leadership table because we've been overly focusing on communication. Mark Ritson calls it communication, which is 8% of the job as a marketer. It should be diagnosis, strategy, tactics, a third, and then inside tactics you have the 4 P's: product, price, promotion, and place. So a fourth of a third is actually 8%. And so we've been obsessing so much about promotion and Facebook ads and thinking that our job is communication, that we've forgotten that marketing is also about the product. And so our job is to carve the right product for that market, not the other way around. So I've been extremely voicey inside Hotjar about this. I've been extremely voicey around doing customer research, understanding the people that we seek to serve, the actual pain that they had. We've been, really pushing hard for this. It wasn't that difficult because everyone believed the same thing internally. But I never saw my job as a marketer in there as just someone who just communicates on the product that we already have. I never took the product for granted. I challenged it a lot. And hopefully some of the changes that we see in Hotjar today are a result of the work that we've been doing as a marketing team, pushing hard for customers to be understood and to be served with the right product.
So when you work with a SaaS business today, I mean, like Hotjar, or maybe some of your current clients that you serve besides the course that you do, where do you start? Can you walk us through your process? How can listeners at home do this themselves?
Yeah. So the first, I mean, it depends. If you're a founder or if you're the CEO and whatnot, I would argue that the first thing you need to do is really identify your unique ability, your strengths, the things that you're the best at. One of the things that make people do in the program is to send emails to people they know and ask them, what do you think is the thing I'm the best in the world at, the thing that, you'd recognize to be a unique ability, which is something that you get better and better, you love doing, that people recognize as a strength. And the reason why I typically start with that is because it gives a boost of confidence, but it also gives you clarity around what you can use to double down on. And if you're the founder or the creator or solopreneur, it's like, this is your whole thing. This is your whole brand. And when I did my own exercise, I realized that the strength that I had was to be able to pick an edge to something, be able to recognize quickly with intuition. That's the spicy bit. That's the thing you need to fucking double down on to differentiate. As an example, The other thing that I make people do is challenging their mindset, what we started to talk about, which is the fact that, standing out is not risky. Blending in is the risky bit. Challenging this primal brain of yours into thinking differently about stuff. The fact that competitors follow each other, but instead, if you follow the market, things are different. But practically speaking, the first thing I make people do is really identify the minimum viable market they want to go after. This underserved segment of people who are not satisfied with competitive alternatives, the things that other people would use if they couldn't use your product, and trying to find those people first. So starting with the people, not with the product. So I make people kind of list down 4 criterias. Do you have access to them? Do you like working with them? Do they have money to pay? And can they say yes? And by just listing down current clients or prospective clients and just looking at that from this way, it usually starts to shine in terms of, okay, you've been focusing on way too many people. Let's start again with the minimum viable market where you can make a lot of money from, but you can become the best and the only in that market, and then you can use that money to grow and grow and grow. So pain, access, joy, and profitability. So pain is, do they have a bleeding neck problem? Is it something that they really want to fucking do right now? If you don't have this kind of right now, I need that right now, you will struggle because it's going to be a nice to have, not a must have. Joy, do you actually like working with people like that? Like, the reason why I'm not really working with CMOs of big companies is because they are boring as fuck. Those are not my people. They are not my people. I like people who like to take risk. I like people who invent stuff and create. And these people like you are the people I love to hang out with. So you need to ask yourself the same question. And it's so important as a challenger brand, even as a company of a startup of 200 people. Like, you need to ask yourself this question because life is too short to spend time with people you don't like. Profitability, can they pay you? And that's a crazy question to ask, I know, but like, if your startup is for students, you're going to struggle a lot. So can they pay you good money, especially as a solopreneur, as a bootstrapper? You need people who have money to spend. And then the kind of, can they say yes aspect, the access is so important. So are you targeting people who can say yes to your offer, or do they have to ask their boss? If they have to ask their boss, then those are not your customers. You need to ask the boss. And the access is something that people forget, which is the last bit, which is you have an email list, a podcast, a newsletter, Facebook group, network of people like them. Because if you don't, it's going to be really tough. So I think it goes back to your question from a few minutes ago about knowing, having been in the game for a long time and knowing the ins and outs. If you just start out and listen to this interview and you've never done anything in the space before, I would challenge you to start again and just get a job before you start, because access is critical. It's fun to think of a product and do an MVP and market it and whatever. But then when it comes to, now we need customers, this is when the access becomes really painful.
Right. And I mean, I feel like also I've gone for the people who don't know, who are listening to this, like, I've gone through your course as well, actually the very first one you did. And I mean, I remember the thing that is hardest once you really try to wrap your head around like radical differentiation, is the niching down and the kind of voluntarily making your market smaller, right? So that you can focus. Can you talk a bit about this fear? I mean, you have now gone through 2 cohorts, so that's about like 30 people, 40 people.
Yeah, and nearly 40 people.
Yeah. So like, can you talk a bit about this fear and how it manifests in people, like what the voice says and what you say against it?
Yeah, the voice says we won't make enough money with that small group of people, like we're gonna starve and it's gonna be over. And so the protection against it is, let's try to go after way more people so that it's much easier. We can carve a tiny piece of the pie, and it's much easier this way. But it's counterintuitively the opposite is true. The smaller your audience, the easier it will be for you to make money. The more you can claim that 50% plus market share in your tiny market, the more you can use that money and that kind of leverage and momentum to go after more and more markets. So like, it's not me who's invented that process. It's just everyone, every kind of marketing thinker, from Seth Godin to Geoffrey Moore, who wrote, I'm going to forget the thing. I'll find it in a few seconds. The other book who talked about the beachhead strategy, talking about the early adopter and the adoption curve and all of that. That in order for you to stand out, you must grab as much market share as you can. And in order for you to be seen as the only, as to be seen as the leader, you need to carve out a small piece of the market that really can't fucking wait for you because they've been underserved by competitive alternatives and direct competitors. And like in your example, you could have gone after every B2B startups in the world. And I think or B2B SaaS, and I think that was your idea originally. But there's so many ways to slice that market, to make it smaller for you and to dominate it. And so that's why back and forth, you happen to focus on like specifically B2B SaaS in Switzerland to start with a certain number of employees, or I don't remember exactly the thing. But then this is when you can really know them so well that you can, become a leader, become top of mind for that small market, and use that to your advantage to go to the next one.
And it's interesting. So and I think you mentioned this at some point before, the positioning kind of keeps evolving. So because you're changing and the company changes, and the positioning starts to, I mean, for us, for example, I think first, just for a bit of context, like first we were like, I think we were like conversion rate optimization. It's like conversion rate optimize pretty much anything. Then we were, your favorite word, like growth marketers, growth marketing, agency. And then we were like, okay, B2B marketing, B2B SaaS marketing, B2B SaaS marketing in Switzerland. And in the meantime, I feel like we have even gone a step further. It's like B2B. So the direct people that I talk to is B2B marketing leaders that just started. So basically people who like switch to the role new, like, I don't know, there may be half a year to 2 years, 3 years in. I have access to that market. Like, I've been part of that market, so I know their challenge. But it's honestly like, I think if I would have gone into it immediately, like if I would have not started at the center of the map, if you want, it would have been tough to immediately say like, hey, let's go after like the 20 people that maybe even this market just in Switzerland is maybe 20 people, but I have like a really good access to them and I can go broader anytime, right? And so just as also encouragement for everybody that's listening, like, it is a process. And we are going through it continuously. I don't know how it is for you in terms of like your positioning. Do you feel like you have kind of nailed it for a couple of years and this is what you're going to do, or like do you feel it evolving for yourself as well?
Yeah, and it has to evolve. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff you've covered that needs to be unpacked. So the formula of radical differentiation is to say we are the only whatever in that category that does that thing, that offers that value, help like resolve that pain for that specific group of people. So for you, your category, you started as conversion rate optimization agency, where you compete against conversionrateexperts.com, leaders in the market, CXL, leaders in the market for years and years. And as soon as you put yourself in that box, people will compare you to them straight away. Boom. Oh, you're CRO? Okay, well, how are you better on conversion rate experts? Then you're fucked. So by looking closely at the box, which is the category, and really refining it to the point where you put your strengths and your product, your services to its advantage, then people stop comparing you with others because your box is smaller. So as soon as you say, well, we are B2B SaaS consulting for new senior marketers in Switzerland, there is no one they can compare to. There's no one they can say, well, how are you better than X? If they ask you how are you better than commercial analytics personnel, you can say, well, we only do that, and we are the best in
Right.
the world at it for that reason. And there's a core psychological phenomenon which is called to satisfy, which is a mix of satisfaction and suffice, which is about people don't pick the best option out of all of the options out there. They pick the least risky one. And that's so important to
Mm-hmm.
consider for you. Consider it. What is the least risky option for a B2B SaaS leader in Switzerland? To pick someone, an agency that does only that thing for them, or to pick a bigger agency that serve all of those other people. And
Right.
that's the answer to differentiation and to niching down, is that you become the least risky option by specializing, because they know you understand them, you speak their language, you have a process just for them. And then you can use that practice, like that formula, and go deeper and deeper without losing that edge. But to go back to my stuff, um, my positioning, my category is like so radical differentiation. Not many people talk about that. The term has been called by Martin Neumeyer a few years ago in his book Zag. A few people talk about differentiation, positioning, but no one really kind of seemed to own that term, and that was my bet, right? To go after not differentiation, but radical differentiation, which means like I help you stand the fuck out, not just like a bit stand out. And I don't think that's going to change. Meaning, I don't think that category is going to evolve. I think it will be a mistake to dilute it. I think I'm going to double down on that methodology and making sure I get better and better at it. The people I serve is probably going to go smaller, but it's a small slice of the market that I'm serving, small slice of the creator slash startup founders kind of market, because I only serve people who can tolerate curse words. I only serve people who are risky enough, who fancy themselves as to be risky. And so it's a lot of process of elimination. And what I want to say on that step of the target market is that it's not only vertical, very kind of firmographic based positioning like yours. Yours is actually a mix of psychographic and firmography.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only that, it could be something very psychographic based about a pain, about something. And once you understand, okay, there is this very intense pain, who suffer from that the most, then you can find
Mm-hmm.
like they tend to be aged that way, they tend to work in there, they tend to live there, but it shouldn't be necessarily your top criteria. Quick example, I consulted for an organic shampoo company focusing on Latinas only in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Their thing was that, yeah, we serve every Latina. And I told them, no, you have a much smaller market than you think you have, especially at the start, if you want to challenge like Procter and Gamble. And so we did all the process, interviewing customers, identifying why they bought and whatever, and looking at competitors and why they bought competitors, and identified that the ones that were the most in pain, the one they had access to, the one that really, really eager to have a shampoo like that was women, Latina women, with long, frizzy hair, living in California and Florida in particular. And the reason why was that when you go to the edge of the map and think about the ones that are the most in pain and really need a shampoo, the ones who have long frizzy hair have struggled the most with controlling those hair and the frizz, something that they really care about because it's all about their appearance. And not only that, but they live in warm, humid weather. That
Right.
makes their hair even worse. And so when they changed that and focused on that minimum viable market, they did all of those campaigns around that. They tripled their revenue within a month because of it. Literally, conversion rate went through the roof because their campaigns are all around that and all around that message. And so you see, apart from knowing that they're Latinas, the rest is very not firmographic. I don't know where they fucking work. I don't care. You know, they have
Right.
this set of pain. And then, yeah, you can layer down, okay, they tend to live there, they tend to have that age and whatever. And for you, you said something super important I want to go back to. You say something about the triggers, which is something people forget a lot when they do research on their customers. It's what makes people feel that pain much higher than they used to. What makes people go from, I have a goal, but it's a dream, I'm basically not doing anything, to it needs to be done today, it's a must have. And so when you start understanding that layer, this is when you have a competitive advantage because you can anticipate demand. As soon as someone say,
Right.
well, I've just joined that new startup as a CMO in B2B growth, I know you've done that. You can you anticipate their needs. Where you say, well, I know exactly what you're going to go through before you even start. And that's the basic of science. When you're able to accurately predict events that will happen in the future, you enter the scientific realm. And that's when marketing becomes a science of, if I know the triggers you're going through, I know the problems you're going to go after, and I know the product that you're going to need. And once you have that information, you can radically stand out because you can anticipate, you can be in front of them much earlier than direct competitors, and things become a lot of fun.
I actually, the triggers, and maybe something we can come later to, which were the kind of seeking a villain that you're kind of positioning yourself against. For the triggers were one of the biggest learnings for me at the time, because like in the meantime, I have evolved it even to someone who is new in a leadership role is trying to grow at the pace of the startup that they are working at. And this comes with a set of challenges that are pretty similar. Like there's the marketing challenges, but there's also like the kind of personal challenges in terms of mindset and in terms of all of that, where we can kind of just help just because we've gone through it. And I think that's something that we didn't anticipate at all, but in hindsight, it all makes sense, right? But thinking about those triggers just helped me a lot in like sales conversations and so forth. And so I think we talked about this before as well. It's been quite a game changer, because you can actually weed out pretty quickly who you can serve and who you can't. And being honest about that is just something that that takes a bit of getting used to in the beginning. And
so,
sorry.
No, I'm looking at my screen right now because I'm actually writing an essay on this very specific topic of triggers, and I just want to say, just give a few examples so that people understand exactly what I mean. So, I can give a few examples to people who went through the program, the actual triggers, instead of making them up, real stuff. So, for example, we had a VP of marketing working for a group of senior living facilities in Canada. And the triggers, it's a bit of a sad thing, but it's also helpful. I mean, senior living facilities are helpful for people who are at this stage of life that we all go through. One of the core triggers was a recent diagnosis of sickness that required a high care setting, right? Something you understand quickly, but you can anticipate things, and you can have partnership with GPs and whatever, whereby when someone has like something like a broken bone, something like a broken hip, an illness, and you can say, listen, it's much easier for you if you move to a senior living facility where you can like live your life properly, have your own routine, but at least you'll be in the right situation. Another one, founder of an app teaching coding to primary school teachers in the UK. The core trigger was that a concern that the Office for Standards in Education, Children's Services and Skills, the Ofsted, would visit the school and look at the curriculum, realizing that they are not teaching coding, which is a mandatory thing. So you can understand, you can play on that, you can really be there once they have it, or even before. Last one I would say was something that I think we understand a bit better with COVID. COVID was a massive external trigger for many, many businesses. A senior marketer working for a service supplying snacks and drinks in break rooms in the office. The massive external trigger was COVID happening, and we needed to change our way to serve those people. And they created a new product, like a delivery thing, because managers wanted to still show employees that they cared about them. So once you understand triggers, you can really be like so far ahead of most people, and it's probably the single piece of information that is going to change the way you see your people and the way you market it, for sure.
I can second that. Thanks for the examples. I think finding the triggers of your customers just also changes the whole approach, how you do marketing and how you get people to notice you, that are people that are at the right stage, I would say. And I think that was the missing piece for me, people that are right stage and not just, I mean, it could even be the same people, but they might not be at the right stage yet.
And see what you just there, like that's so important. They might have been the same people, but they were not at that stage yet. And that's exactly why I fight against this bullshit of defining your market solely based on firmographics element. Like they have this age, they are in this role and whatever. It doesn't tell you anything about the state of desire that they have, like the desire for the state. They might have a goal of increasing targets or whatever, but that might not be a priority until the new boss comes in and they put you under pressure and you need to reach the target. And so things change drastically. So there's many things you can do. Like I know a lot of stuff are being done in growth marketing at the minute in terms of automation and identifying companies that are hiring right now, identifying companies that have been funded, because those are set of triggers that you can see externally and anticipate and say, hey, you are hiring a team of product managers. Well, I anticipate the fact that you're going to struggle with X, Y, and Z, and you kind of know that they are in this state. So it's really important, I think, that you just said there.
Yeah, I think actually your fellow Frenchman, what's his name, Caban. I missed his name. I think he does a lot of work with like software triggers. So what happens if someone buys a certain kind of software is actually a trigger that is pretty predictable of where the stage of the company and kind of what they need next and so forth. So it's pretty smart actually. When we come to the villains, to me the villains, what happened there for us was, once we started to define who we are kind of not necessarily always fighting against, but definitely who we are not, was for us, we started to get, how you mentioned before, kind of the people we want to work with. Because so what we do now is, we say like we are an agency who builds systems. And we are here at least for 6 months. We're not quick fixes. We don't do hacks. We don't do any of that. Then we're not the right ones. I say this pretty early when I talk to people. And I say it maybe even a little bit in a tone of like, I don't think you should do it that way, unless you're maybe at a very early stage and you need to have very high velocity of experiments because you don't have product market fit yet, maybe. So for me, kind of saying what we're not, and I'm not sure if that's exactly the villain analogy, but saying who we're not and kind of defines almost better who we are afterwards. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well and some examples from your cohorts.
Well, there is a reason why conspiracy theorists are the way they are. So what they are is that they're anxious about the state of the present, and instead of thinking that pain that is being caused to them is due to multiple factors that are very difficult to describe because it's a full system, and that like climate change and all of that is not there to get them. It's much easier for them to process it and to think, okay, the reason why I feel anxious is because of that group of people. That makes it much more at ease for them to process it and to understand why they are in pain. That's why religion is here for. It's really help you process the present better so that you can like have someone to blame, have someone to believe in and whatnot. And this process of finding a villain is about that. It's about using that psychology principle to understand that people are anxious all the time about things and providing them with a direction and saying, hey, this is what we're not, this is what we are, this is what's causing you pain, is making them feel better. And you kind of do the emotional labor on their behalf. So it's not just picking an enemy for the sake of it. It's really about what is causing your people the most pain. What is the reason of their pain? And making the work for them so that they understand it quickly. And so it's not about saying all of the other agencies are shit. It's about saying that what they've been doing so far, or maybe the market as it is, or the status of the world as it is the reason why they're in pain, and it's okay, and we're here to help you. For example, what I would say a lot is that the enemy for me, the villain, is the clutter. The fact that the reason why you struggle to stand out, the reason why it's so difficult for you, is because clutter is everywhere. Everyone with a brain and a computer can start a business tomorrow and add to the noise, add to the content noise, feature noise, product noise, everything. And so I understand that, and we're all in the same boat. But I think I have something I can give you that will help you feel better. And even before saying anything about radical differentiation, you understand straight away what I do. because you
Mm-hmm.
lean against something else. And that's one of the core principles that you need to, like, people need to understand is don't put your product service in a box without any context. Lean against something else. There is a reason why hippopotamus stands for water horses in ancient Greek. Is because they lean against something they knew, horses, but they said actually it's like big horses. They live in the rivers.
Uh-huh.
River horse, not water, river horse.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the same thing. When cars came into the world, they didn't call them cars. They called them horseless carriages to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people need. They need to lean. You need to lean on something that you already know in order for you to explain what you do. But it's not, again, about blaming direct competitors or saying they're all shit. It's really about understanding the source of their pain and doing the emotional labor on their behalf so that they feel better.
It's really interesting because I mean, and the, what really happened to us is once we started doing that, is just it was like if someone, if I would clearly say like, hey, we don't do one-off campaigns or something like that, uh, it was immediately clear that okay, are we the right fit or not? And so it might be a bit scary in the beginning, but it is just it's also healthier for us as a company. So we don't take clients that are not on the same boat, because it we started actually out doing it differently, right? We started just like, oh yeah, I mean, sure, yeah, we can work with it, and then we're gonna make them understand while we're doing it, right? And that didn't work out so well always. And so we're doing it the opposite now, and yeah, it helped me tremendously. So everyone that's listening, kind of defining who you're not, aka your villains, um, that helps tremendously, and is also a good starter, I feel like, to kind of get into this topic of differentiation. Um, we at some point you mentioned category creation, and there's a lot about category creation out there, and a lot of people that talk very fondly of category creation and that everybody should do it. The first time I really heard it was, I think, from Drift, when they started talking about it all over the place, with this conversational marketing, I think it was something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's really a new category per se, but so what is your, I had Chris Lockhart on the podcast, and he is, I think he wrote books, there are newsletters about he writes newsletters with two other guys about this, and he's a strong purveyor of this concept, category creation. He basically says, I think in these words, you're kind of a loser if you're if you don't have your own category. So I would like to paint the um the kind of other side of the coin of category creation that you sometimes talk about.
By the way, I actually have more time than I thought. So let's take the time to complain about this because I
Mhm.
want to make sure I do a good job.
Okay.
Because it's so important. So you've probably read Blue Ocean Strategy, the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, Differentiate or Die, Play Bigger, all of those books, you
Mhm.
know, and you're a new marketer in a startup and you're eager to make a move, like to make a dent. And you're being sold this idea that, you know, like Drift and HubSpot created the inbound marketing category. You know, it's the only way to stand out. Who doesn't want a blue ocean full for you of fishes to fish with no competitors to annoy you and no competitor alternatives to annoy you? Like, I mean, I understand the premise. Who wouldn't
Right.
want that? Now, the problem is it's for, I mean, I'm sorry to use a shitty kind of stats because it's not proven in anything, but I'm pretty sure that for 99.99% of businesses out there, it's irrelevant, it's stupid, it's the worst fucking thing you could do for your business. And when I say businesses, I don't mean B2B SaaS tech startup only. Like there's a world around outside of SaaS, just to be clear, of actual businesses that sell stuff that people
Mhm.
need. So the thinking that to differentiate, you create a new category is bullshit for a lot of reasons. So most category creation case studies are not category creation case studies. They are subcategories. In the Blue Ocean Strategy book, they talk about this air fryer, which is a brand new category. It's not. They lean against the fryer, which is an appliance
Mhm.
that already exists, and they
Mhm.
make it better by using way less oil. same category, different subcategories. Now you might say semantics, blah blah blah. No, so important because you're leaning against and on something that already exists in people's mind. Horseless
Mm-hmm.
carriages, river horses.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't just call that, like call a new name, because people won't understand what it is. And that's the second point. It requires more time, more resources, more money, more experience than you could ever think. You mentioned drift, conversational marketing, that quote unquote created a category. I would argue that they haven't really succeeded after that
Right.
long. No one is really calling
Yeah.
that anyway anymore. I think it's kind of died down. They had hundreds millions of funding. They had a founder with I think 4x
Yeah.
exits as a startup guy. They had so much experience doing it over and over again. Most of the time you don't need to create a category, right? Because I think also it's selfish as fuck. So the reason why I think it's selfish is because it's not about you and your own little success and what you want to do in your business and like create a blue ocean. It's about your market and what they want and what they need. And most of the time you don't need to create a new category. You just need to niche down, obsess over who they are, and maybe one day they'll start repeating and remembering something you've done, and you start to do so well that yeah, maybe you start to carve out its own thing, and that might happen naturally. But you trying to force the process is bullshit. And in fact, I was talking to the VP of marketing at HubSpot on my podcast a few months ago, who confirmed the fact that they never tried to create an inbound marketing category. What they wanted to do simply is to help people go away from just outbound marketing. And I'm sorry, but you ask. The last thing is
Yeah.
that um, people come up with those new products and they think they're so different and they're so new and they're so blah blah blah. But the truth is that most products look the same from the outside perspective. And if you try to create a new category with a CRM that does that one thing slightly differently, honestly, it's going to fail. You are too much in the weeds to understand that people don't see differences into your category. Your category connoisseur, you know it way too much than the average Joe. And so
Mm.
lean on something that already exists. Stop obsessing over a selfish endeavor, which is like a blue ocean, which is also bullshit. It's never blue. You will always have competitive alternative to fight against, always have competitors that will appear. And instead, like obsess over serving a group of people. And then you can take it from there.
I feel like the category creation thing. I mean, I'm glad you also mentioned these subcategories, because I think that's just what a lot of people do. I mean, and then oftentimes it's also semantics. It has a lot to it. I mean, in my estimation, at least, I think it's fine to own a term or to try to coin a term in a way, if you put it into the context. It's I have, like, can you even name, like, what would for you be a category, like a truly new category?
That's a good question.
Because there's not much, right? I mean, a car, I guess, is
Like
pretty,
Segway.
but that's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then you can argue, well, it's something that already existed, but like it's leaning on something that might have already existed, like a tricycle or whatever. But that's
Mm-hmm.
what innovation is. It's never something brand new. You always reuse and rehash something that already exists. And this is kind of my fight, is because when you talk about
Right.
category creation, people start coming up with new terms and they don't lean on something that already exists, and they
Mm-hmm.
make a massive, massive mistake. Instead, like, why don't you just take a chill pill, understand that you're not going to solve
Mm.
world hunger, and that you start with something people already know. And the end, yeah, sure, you might actually coin a new term, a new subcategory in the process, but it shouldn't be kind of your own your first goal.
You're completely own. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how much this kind of came up, because it's something alluring, right? I mean, again, people want to be unique, and then they especially founders, they're like, yeah, but it's this breakthrough idea you don't understand, kind of thing. I think a very important point that you mentioned is people that found companies, and employees of companies that have been there for a while, they're category, if you want, connoisseurs or industry connoisseurs. Like, they know so much more about the market than people the outside would ever care, right? And I think like that's also good insight, because you might not want to go this deep and having to explain why you're now something else or new when nobody ever asked for it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there is an entire symmetry of dead startups to try to create a category, and that's the fallacy of the survivorship bias. You only see the ones who actually made it to the end. But honestly, it's very difficult to find any pure category play, like actual genuine new breakthrough categories, and I can't even think of one, which is probably down to me. I need to do more research, but you do see a good some good subcategories move, but because they've niched down, they've obsessed over a smaller group of people who've been underserved by existing alternatives, and then they've obsessed over it. And maybe there's a term that starts appearing to describe it, but my point is that it's organic, it's natural, it starts from you obsessing over your customers and not from you obsessing over making more money or raising more millions, to add to their slide deck.
To kind of finish this topic off, like I also talked about this with Chris Lockhart while I sat there, that it was a very so I was kind of, I guess, in a startup very early on, the first employee that kind of tried to do this, and it was very exhilarating. It was like an adventure, and it felt like super interesting. I mean, what we basically did is we kind of developed a machine that works a little bit like Nespresso, but for flatbread. So in the capsule, instead of coffee, you have like dough inside, and then you make a fresh bread in a minute. And so but it didn't work. So for 4 years we did it, and this is how I always had to say it, right? Like, yeah, but it's like Nespresso, but for bread. And it's like, what do you mean? That doesn't even make any sense. So, and then we did a Kickstarter campaign and all of that, and it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle, and like in our conversation, we talked about like it was exciting. I'm not saying it wasn't exciting, but I don't think that's the point you're trying to make. I think it's risky. It's like it's super risky,
It's
and
stupid.
it's it's stupid too. I mean, I'm all for like people daring and trying stuff, but unnecessary risk is also not. You're not serving anyone, right? Or you're not impressing anyone if you take unnecessary risk either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I'm still trying to be mindful of your time. So what would you like to kind of end this conversation with? What would you like to impart into people that are trying to differentiate and stand the fuck out?
So the last thing I would say to close the loop is that once you have your market that you've really identified, once you have the thing you want to lean against, once you really done your research and ask questions such as what do you hate the most about the current category, the current thing, then it's all about removing as much as possible. There's something that people forget. Like, I think naturally as humans we add to stuff, but removing is such a beautiful process when it's done right. It's about removing everything that is fluffy, excessive, doesn't solve the biggest pain, doesn't serve people that well. Because when you remove stuff, you shed light on the right things, you shed light on the few things that matter. And even, making sure that you mention weaknesses and that were not for you and were not that good for that is kind of a core thing. And I would challenge everyone listening to look at companies that they admire, that they think they are differentiated in some way, shape, or form. And instead of looking at what they do, look at what they don't do, what they don't say, who they don't serve. Just as an example of a brand for me that I really admire, like Seth Godin as a person, as a thought leader. Like, think about those things he doesn't say and where he's not and what he doesn't do. And it starts to open up a whole new world. He's not on Facebook, not on Twitter, not on LinkedIn. He blogs every day. He never really talks about tactics and stuff that are going to work today, not tomorrow. He only has one podcast, so one podcast weekly, one newsletter, and he only has one staple, like a big product, like the cohort-based courses, and that's it. I mean, apart from his books. And you could think about thousands of stuff he could have done with his influence and his money, but he's not. And so that's what I would challenge you as a parting thought for you listening, is like, think about where the voids are and where people are not who are successful, and you'll find the answer to what you shouldn't do either. Instead of looking at like 10 people that you admire and just adding all of the stuff they do, you end up with way too much.
I can attest to that. Removing is hard too, but thanks for that that message. So where can people find you, and what should people find you for?
But just Google "Everyone Hates Marketers" and take it from there.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much for this super interesting conversation, Louis. And
welcome,
yeah, I hope you'll be back for another episode where we dive deeper on certain topics. Cheers.
Sure.
Bye, Louis. Cheers.